Thank you, Llywydd. What support is the Welsh Government providing to freelancers in TV and film to ensure the retention of skills in the industry?
Since 2020, we have funded 51 projects in this key sector, resulting in 342 million of spend in Wales. Many freelancers will have had an opportunity to work as a result of this investment.
Thank you very much, First Minister, and I hope that you did have the opportunity to watch over the Gavin Stacey Christmas special. I see that that was a wish that you'd expressed, but that is one example of the success of programmes made in Wales. Welsh programmes are being sold to companies such as Netflix. I see that Bore Mercher and Keeping Faith are going to be shown in Korean and in French now. But behind the success, of course, are people. And as you know, Beck too have said that the freelance industry has expressed a great deal of concern about its future, with over half out of work and 78% struggling to pay their bills. Now, there are interesting examples of which is happening with governments in France and Ireland, for example, to support the industry. What specifically will the Welsh Government do to sustain this freelance industry and to ensure that Welsh programmes are available on screens worldwide?
Well, thank you very much. You're absolutely right. I'm a massive fan of Gavin and Stacey, as I'm sure most of us in this chamber are, and it was good to see Wales being reflected in such a positive way, and the people of Wales also being seen in a positive light, and that so many people across the UK and the world had seen what kind of place Wales is. But you're right, the sector is hugely important to the Welsh economy, and it's worth bearing in mind that very many people have always worked on a freelance basis in the sector. I think there was a perfect storm, because there was the pandemic and then there were the strikes in the United States, and that's why so many people at one time were out of work in that sector. That has reduced somewhat, but this is a problem, as you said, has impacted on people across the industry across Europe. So as I said, what we as a government have done is to make that investment, which is not small by any means, but it has led to £342 million in spend. And what then happens is that people working in the industry have those freelancers working in the industry have an opportunity to work. So that is how we as a government are helping. And I also think it's worthwhile saying that we do provide support in developing skills through our Creative Wales Skills Fund, and we also work indirectly through partnership programmes such as the One Stop Shop that was recently launched. Gareth Davis.
Concerns have been raised by the film industry that funding provided through Pinewood and the Welsh Government is offered on in commercial terms through the market economic investor principle, which has historically favoured more established companies based outside of Wales and places smaller independent creators at a disadvantage. According to evidence submitted by Film Cymru, freelancers and service and facility companies are still at risk following COVID, and many have been unable to access support mechanisms. The Oxford Economics report commissioned by the Creative Industries Federation showed that Wales is projected to lose 26% of its creative jobs and see a 10% drop in creative industries' gross value added. So supporting the industry at its grassroots is important. Film Cymru do great work to support independent filmmakers by providing grants and investment for small start-up production companies, ensuring that those skills remain in Wales. But it's important that they have the resources to provide this support to creators. The reduction in the lottery funding, which is delegated by the Arts Council Wales, has also had a significant impact, and this is how Film Cymru receives its funding, but they are keen to attract more philanthropic donations. So I'd like to know what the Welsh Government is doing to encourage philanthropic donations to groups like Film Cymru that support independent filmmakers, and what the Welsh Government is doing to attract international investment in the industry. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. I know for a fact that the creative sector, and films and TV in particular, is a core part of what we were trying to promote in the international strategy. And I think since that time, actually, we've seen the sector grow significantly in Wales. If you just looked at 2023 alone, the creative sectors in Wales generated an annual turnover of 1.5 billion, and that was an increase of 10.6% on the previous year. That is phenomenal growth and something that I think should be celebrated. And part of that was the 51 projects that we as a government have supported. And of course, we would encourage not just international investment, but also those philanthropic donations, as you suggested we should.
Mick Anthony.
First Minister, firstly, if I can declare an interest, my son works in the, as a freelancer in the film and TV industry. BEC2, the trade union who represent many of the freelancers, are saying that despite some slight recovery post the strike and post-COVID, 70% of freelancers are currently out of employment. Many are actually leaving the industry completely, and of course many of them have very little access to any form of state benefits as a effectively self-employed freelancer, which causes a significant problem. One of the major problems, as I understand it, from the trade union BEC2, is that many of the people in the industry that work as freelancers are often imported from outside Wales, so we're not actually maximising the use of the Welsh skills and so on, and that is sort of a cultural problem within the industry itself. So I'm wondering what can be done to refocus within Wales on the use of Welsh freelancers for productions that take place within Wales, but also the support is necessary to retain the skills in the industry.
Well, thanks very much. And you're quite right. I know that BEC2, which was my old union, that they made a suggestion that in July 2024 they carried out a report, and those working in the sector were around out of work, or about 68%. By July, from February to July, that had fallen to 52%, so it gives you some sense that actually there's quite a lot of change going on, but 52% is still phenomenally high. It is a very tough industry. The nature of much of the industry is that they take people on a freelance basis. And of course, we as a government would always encourage any investors or any local companies to use Welsh freelancers. We have extremely talented freelancers here in Wales, and I don't see why there is a need to import people from outside if we have those skills here in Wales.
Question 2, Sam Rowlands.
What is the Welsh Government doing to improve road infrastructure in North Wales?
Our current list of strategic road network infrastructure improvements is contained in the National Transport Delivery Plan. Funding will also be made available to local authorities for local road repairs and fixing hundreds of potholes, as the people told me this was important to them during my listening exercise in North Wales.
Well, thank you for your response, First Minister. And we know after many years, the Heads of the Valleys Road here in South Wales is reaching completion as the most expensive road in Wales, around £2 billion worth of spending. Now, my residents in North Wales are asking, where's the £2 billion worth of spending on roads up in North Wales? We know that there's a huge opportunity to unleash the economy of North Wales through investments on the A55, investments on the A483 around Wrexham in particular, and investment on a third crossing over to Eluned Morgan as well to meet the needs of people on the island as well. So, First Minister, could you provide clarity as to when North Wales is going to receive the levels of investment needed to unleash the economy that is so desperately needed? Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Well, thanks very much, Sam. And I can assure you that we are investing in the road infrastructure in North Wales. I'll just give you some examples. The River Dee Bridge replacement, that is not an insignificant investment. The Menai crossing resilience improvements, the Wrexham multimodal corridor improvements, and city centre connectivity. There's also £20 million worth of funding to invest in transport priorities across the region, including in Denbighshire, Flintshire, Gwynedd, Wrexham and Eluned Morgan.
Hannah Blythen.
Clywed, and Prif Weinidog, I welcome your comments just then about the investment in the River Dee Bridge improvement. Actually, I'm old enough, sadly, to remember the infrastructure that predated the A55, and when it was so bad, on a trip to our caravan in Anglesey, my mum could get out the car, do a bit of shopping and then walk and reach yours again, still in the traffic jam going through Conway. But that said, today, the A55 remains the main gateway into North Wales and it's a crucial connection for residents and visitors alike, one that is also a key component for the economic infrastructure for our part of the country. There are things we can do to improve and enhance this existing road infrastructure that would both address so-called pinch points and also bring broader benefits, especially Prif could perhaps in partnership with the UK Government and of course involving local decision makers to prioritise consideration to practical and innovative improvements to the A55, such as looking at crawler lanes around the Hulking area, measures to mitigate accidents and also alleviating the knock-on impacts of breakdowns, which is currently an issue for many. Diolch.
Very much, Hannah, and I know your commitment to speaking up for the people in your area when it comes to transport. And what is important, I think, is for us to recognise that there are still pinch points, as you say. What's going to happen next is that the regional transport plans are going to be developed, providing a strategic approach, and they're going to. What we're going to see is joined up working at regional level. And the corporate joint committees are currently drafting their plans. So it's about bringing those authorities together, getting them to make sure that they work with our technical advice officials to make sure that they get the support they need in developing these plans and to make sure that they also align with the Wales transport strategy.
Cwestiynau nawr gan Arwain.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of the Conservatives, Darren Miller.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, do you agree with the growing chorus of voices, including the Labour MP for Rochdale, the Labour MP for Rotherham and the Labour Mayor of Greater Manchester, that we need a new UK-wide inquiry into child sexual exploitation by grooming gangs?
Thanks. First of all, I think it is important when we're discussing sensitive issues like this that we think first of the victims. And many have endured dreadful abuse, and I think it's really important we stand with them and by them when we seek justice. Look, I think it's really disappointing that this issue is being politicised to a point where people working for humanitarian organisations and children in school feel threatened. Yes, absolutely. And I really hope we can tone down the rhetoric on this issue.
With respect, First Minister, you didn't answer my question, which was, do you support the calls which have been made by many people, including those victims that we do need to listen carefully to? Do you support the calls for a new UK-wide inquiry into grooming gangs and child exploitation as well? We know that people up and down Wales are talking about this issue. They need assurances that both the Welsh and the UK governments, along with the police and social services, are doing all that they can to prevent young girls in Wales from becoming victims of grooming gangs. They want to know that justice will be served against the perpetrators of these crimes. But they can only have those assurances if we know the full extent of the problems that we have here in Wales and the actions which are being taken by everybody to address them. So can I ask you, in addition to that first question, which you didn't answer, what communications has the Welsh Government had with the police, with Welsh Local Authority social care departments and with other stakeholders regarding grooming gangs operating here in Wales and the estimated number of Welsh victims? And will you publish the correspondence between the Welsh Government and those organisations in order to prevent any allegations that might be made of a cover-up?
I can see what's happening here. I'm disappointed, but I will answer your question. Look, the Welsh Government fully supported the previous independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. Yes. And we are, on the back of that, developing a 10-year strategy for preventing and responding to child sexual abuse. Yes. The author of that report made it very clear that her interest was in making sure that the recommendations of that report were actioned, and I can assure you that several of those recommendations have already been implemented here in Wales.
First Minister, you've talked about a 10-year action plan. People want, of course, rapid action. There have been recommendations made to the Welsh Government. I asked you 2 specific questions. You haven't now answered the second question, which was about what correspondence has taken place between the Welsh Government, Welsh police forces, Welsh local authorities and other stakeholders about the extent of these issues, because people need those assurances. Now, it's very clear to me that you're not able to provide those assurances today, and that, I'm afraid, is a national scandal. We know from media reports that young girls have been recruited by grooming gangs here in South Wales before being gang raped and then trafficked to Telford, Hereford and Blackpool. One victim has even said that she was strangled, she was threatened with a knife, and her home was threatened with being burnt down. She was then raped, I'm afraid to say, First Minister, 1,000 times. She didn't know the number of perpetrators because there were so many.
I need you to come to your question now. You are being overly descriptive, and I think verging on not being totally respectful of the victim at this point. So can you tone down the rhetoric slightly?
I'm afraid I'm simply reading facts.
No, you're not.
No, you're not.
The use of language in this place needs to be making sure that you are keeping well away from inflaming any kind of discrimination or inciting of any kind of discrimination. You were doing very well, Darren Miller, with your first 2 questions in avoiding that. In your third one, you've become overly descriptive, and I need you to now reflect on that and just ask the question again, please.
I am not seeking to inflame anything.
Good. I'm glad you confirmed that. I'm glad you confirmed that. Now carry on with your question.
Yes. So we know that some of the things which have been described by victims have been absolutely sickening. We know that those things have taken place, young girls in Wales have taken place in terms of recruitment by grooming gangs in Wales.
Darren Miller, I ask you for your question.
So we need to know that these things, we don't have another Rotherham or Rochdale on our doorstep.
Darren
so can
Miller,
I ask you...
You're keeping to your script now, and you're not listening to my advice. If you do not ask your question in the next 10 seconds, I'm going to ask you to sit down. I did not expect to have to do this to you in your first few weeks as leader of the Welsh Conservative Party in here.
My question is this. Given that you oppose a UK-wide inquiry, given that we haven't had the assurances which I've sought from you today, and given the extent of public concern, will you now commission a Wales-wide inquiry into child sexual exploitation by grooming gangs here in Wales?
Darren, I've got to say I'm really disappointed in you. I wasn't expecting you to take on that kind of approach. This is something, I think, where we've got to remember the victims and remember them in a way that will be supportive. And I don't think what we've seen in the past few days has been a place where they would feel supported. Now, I can make it clear to you that I have asked questions about to what extent this is an issue in Wales of the police. I think that what is important is we recognise that actually in Wales we have legislated. There are duties in Wales to report, which were introduced back in 2014. You may not be aware of this, Darren, but this was a part of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. There is a legal duty on agencies, including health boards, including police, probation, other local authorities, to inform the local authority if they have reasonable cause to suspect that a child or an adult with care and support needs in their area is at risk of abuse, neglect or harm. That's in our law. It already exists.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru.
Leader of Plaid Cymru, Rhyn ap Iorwerth. Thank you, Llywydd. Last week, the First Minister invited me to focus only on those things that she has an influence on, not on issues related to her relationship with the Keir Starmer government. Although she is the leader of Keir Starmer's party in Wales, I'm afraid that she can't wash her hands of things that easily. But I did ask a question on NHS waiting time, something that she is entirely responsible on. She failed to provide an assurance that she could reach her target of cutting 2-year waiting times by April. Now, given the absence of robust plans from the Welsh Government to cut waiting times, I encourage the First Minister to look at Plaid Cymru's plans that were published today. By introducing specialist hubs on a regional basis, a triage service on a national basis, emergency legislation to generate capacity, to make better use of technology, to assess symptoms, then we believe that waiting times could be as much as halved in a relatively brief period of time. Given the First Minister's emphasis on listening, is she willing to consider these proposals developed in partnership, of course, with healthcare professionals within the NHS?
I think
Well, thank you very much.
that there's a recognition that there's been a 65% reduction in the waiting times for those waiting over 2 years. So we are making significant improvements. I know that extra money that's come into the health service, the 50 million, that will start to make a big difference soon. I have in fact looked at your proposals, and there is not one that we're not already implementing. Local treatment centres, executive triage service, well, you just put the word executive in front of triage service, I don't know how that works. And then the use of technology to get patients treated quicker. Really? We're doing all that already. It's all in our strategy that was developed 7 years ago.
If all of these things were being done already, then waiting lists wouldn't be as they are at the moment.
Something that may on the face of it seem unconnected, but it most certainly isn't. The way we engage with our culture can have a direct impact on our well-being as a nation, including on our health. Access to culture shouldn't be seen as a nice to have. In fact, our cultural heritage is something we celebrate in music, in theatre, in dance, in literature, in Welsh and in English, the land of song. Even our national anthem celebrates it. Gwlad, Beirdd a Chantorion. And we should build on our strengths as well. The cultural sector employs 80,000 people in Wales, but the lack of government support for the sector is deeply worrying. Now, that lack of support led last week to one individual stepping in to do government's work for it. Yeah. The recent withdrawal of support for Wales's national English language theatre company saw Michael Sheen deciding he had no choice but to do it himself, typical of a man who has become known for his deep commitment to Wales and to Welsh culture. Now, can the First Minister say whether she felt a sense of shame that the lack of her government support for culture had led to this? And if so, what does she plan to do differently from now on? Or is she looking to other individuals to whom she can outsource the work of government?
Well, thanks very much. And being a government means you need to make tough decisions and you need to prioritise. And we took some tough decisions last year when it came to culture, and we decided that we needed to put more money into the health service, because you've just been talking about the need to bring waiting lists down. That doesn't happen by magic. You need money for it, and you need to make tough decisions. That's what being a government means. And they were difficult decisions, because we are committed to the culture of our nation. And that's why, as soon as we had additional money, we've put more money in this financial year's, and we've put more money in for next year. On top of that, I think it's probably worth emphasising things like the National Music Service. You know, this is culture, £13 million gone into making sure that we have this focus on music in schools. These are difficult decisions, but again, we want to invest in the cultural future of our children. And I went to see the production of Nye that Michael Sheen was in, and it was an outstanding production. And I did come out of there thinking, which one would he choose? Because he was pushing the fact that the NHS was important, but we have to make those decisions that are very difficult. And, you know, I pay tribute to Michael Sheen. He's been a real champion of Wales, and that production and his commitment to show Wales in an artistic, through an artistic expression is something that we welcome. And obviously, the Arts Council of Wales will want to see whether, once this develops a bit further, they will want to support his project.
I find it troubling that the First Minister doesn't feel a sense of shame or regret about this, and she seems to be in denial about the impact that government decisions have had. And this certainly isn't something that was about a tough spending round last year. The truth is that under successive Labour governments, Wales has slipped to the bottom of the European League table on cultural spend. The Arts Council will get less money in the next financial year than it did 2 years ago. European countries, on average, spend 1.5% of their budgets on culture. Here, the Arts Council budget is 0.15%. Culture in total and sport added together is only half a percentage point. Listen to Noel Mooney, Chief Executive of the FAW this week, responding to the Senedd Culture Commission's report, Committee's report on spending. This race to the bottom, as he called it, and lack of vision, desire and ability needs to stop today. Have ambition, be innovative, have courage, make it happen, and success will come. Please, for Wales. So, to the First Minister of Wales, please, for Wales, will she map out a pathway to investing in our culture at least the European average, or is she willing to see Wales becoming a cultural backwater on her watch?
Looking forward to seeing your budget.
So I think it's really important for us to recognise that, as I say, decisions have to be made. There's an allocation for this financial year, £30 million to the Arts Council of Wales, and there was that additional money that came in, as I suggested. But on top of this, we've given job protection funding, resilience fund, an extra £1 million in resilience fund to support organisation resilience, and a pay award for 64,000 to support an average pay award within the Arts Council of Wales of up to 5%. These things don't come for free. Yeah. I recognise how important culture and the arts is. I absolutely do. But we do have to balance that off against really difficult decisions. And we have kept most of the money in the arts and culture. But we did need, in a time of inflation, at a time when austerity was biting, to make difficult decisions after 14 years of where we needed to prioritise our funding. And the public were clear. They wanted us to spend it in health, and that's what we did.
Question 3, Andrew Arty-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, will you give us a statement on what discussions you've had with the UK Government in relation to protecting young children from grooming gangs?
The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse in England and Wales examined how the country's institutions handled their duty of care to protect children from sexual abuse. As the UK Prime Minister has stated, our focus needs to be on implementing its recommendations. In Wales, progress on this, as I've already said, has been made.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. Could you explain how the recommendations of the Baroness J report are being implemented here in Wales and taken forward? Because they are an important part of the landscape to offer that protection. But could you also, as you didn't respond to the Leader of the Opposition, give clarity to supporting your Labour colleagues Andy Burnham and the small caucus of Labour MPs who are calling for a national inquiry so that the dots can be joined up and those protections can be offered across the whole of the United Kingdom?
So, as I say, we've already have an organisational legal duty, which was one of the recommendations of that independent inquiry. So we already have that in place. We have a 10-year strategy for preventing and responding to child sexual abuse, and that's going to further address matters raised by the inquiry, for example, effective data collection, improving public awareness and understanding of child sexual abuse. There are 4 strands to this strategy, so this is not something that's, a pipe dream. This is something that Jane has been working on very hard. Prevention, protection, supporting children, young people and their families and supporting adult survivors. And key to this is that we engage with key partners and stakeholders to review existing safeguarding systems in Wales.
Alan Davis.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. There is something deeply disturbing and distasteful about the former leader of the opposition using heavily edited images of young schoolgirls in order to prosecute a case that is dripping with racism and prejudice. That should have no place in this Parliament or in our political debate. And I believe that most decent people in Wales will condemn both Andrew R.T. Davis and the Welsh Conservatives for the way in which they have pursued these issues. It is deeply disturbing that racism is becoming the language of prejudice for the Welsh Conservatives, and we need to stand against that. Do you agree with me, First Minister? Do you agree with me? I got a louder voice than you. Do you agree with me, First Minister, that we have to put the interests of victims first, and we must also protect those people who are working hard with refugees, reaching out to people who have suffered appalling distress across the world and who come here for a safe haven? We need to protect those people, and we need to put the victims first, second and third, and not use people in order to make somewhat sleazy political points.
Look, I think it's really important that we do all we can to unite our society rather than divide it.
Cwestiwn 4, Sioned Williams.
Thank you, Llywydd. How is the Welsh Government working with UK Government to ensure the values of the people of Wales are represented on the international stage?
Our mandate is to promote the Welsh values set out in our international strategy, which are also embedded in our international engagement across government. Our overseas offices, co-located with UK Government, are working together on a daily basis to promote Wales, and this includes our values.
Thank you, First Minister. At the beginning of the new year, people in all parts of Wales gathered outside the major hospitals of Wales to draw attention to the health workers who have been killed, injured or imprisoned by Israel's armed forces in Gaza. Hospitals are, of course, protected under international humanitarian law. And the attacks on healthcare facilities and health workers are considered to be war crimes. Amongst them was Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, director at the last remaining hospital in northern Gaza, attacked by the Israeli armed forces. The people attending these vigils were calling on the Welsh Government to speak out. So will you listen on behalf of the people of Wales, condemn Israel's attacks on hospitals in Gaza and call on the UK Government to demand the release of Dr. Abu Safia and every other health worker illegally detained by Israel? As we hear that a possible ceasefire is on the horizon, will you ensure, as the Scottish Government has, that your nation's voice is clearly heard, advocating for peace and justice for the people of Palestine, now and in future, and call on the Westminster Government to cease the sale of arms to Israel until a permanent and robust ceasefire has been agreed?
Well, thank you very much. The third strand of our international strategy does promote Wales as a globally responsible nature, and that includes values of things such as human rights, and we haven't seen much of that in the Middle East or in Ukraine recently. As I've said previously, I've raised this at a British-Irish summit recently, and the Prime Minister was in attendance. I called early on for a ceasefire, and of course we should stand with those health workers in Palestine. I'm sure that everyone is pleased to see that there are signs of a possible ceasefire, and that will be possible between Israel and Hamas. We should all pray that that does happen. I think the people of that area have suffered enough. But of course, generally speaking, international issues are the responsibility of the UK Government, but I will be ensuring that my voice is heard as one who is very eager to see a ceasefire in place. Tom Gifford.
First Minister, next week Donald Trump will be inaugurated as the next President of the United States, and I'm sure the Welsh and UK governments will want to work closely together to ensure that British and Welsh values are made clear to the incoming President, particularly, as you previously mentioned, how close the relationship is between you and President Trump. However, we've seen a deeply concerning reports in the media yesterday that showed Trump's plans for tariffs on British businesses exporting to America could cost British industry £2.5 billion. And shamefully, instead of advocating for British business, the Reform leader, Nigel Farage, spent his summer following Trump around America, actively advocating against the interests of British business and our economy. So will you join with me and the Welsh Conservatives, First Minister, in advocating for Welsh businesses on the international stage, rather than try and sell away our economic interests like Reform and Farage seek to do?
Thanks very much. Well, I think we've got to get ready for an interesting ride when we see a new president inaugurated in the United States next week. Tariffs clearly would be very harmful to our businesses in Wales, and it would inevitably lead to job losses. So I think it is something that we need to take very seriously, which is why I'm very pleased that I've accepted a request to meet with the new ambassador from the United Kingdom, who will be going to the United States, to make the case for how important a market the United States is for Wales, and how important it is that we can drive further investment from the United States into Wales, and that we can also encourage exports, ideally without a tariff.
Alan Thomas.
So Wales is a small country of about 3 million people, but we really punch above our weight when it comes to showing our culture, our language and our values. Whether we choose to live here or born here, Wales is full of wonderful communities, kind, caring people who help the neighbours. Look what happened during the pandemic, helping Ukraine refugees. We have marvellous agricultural shows, and Eisteddfodau. I'm really proud to be part of Wales and to live here. St David's Day is a really good day for promoting our Welsh values across the world. And I was wondering, what is Welsh Government doing to promote Wales and our wonderful values across the world on St David's Day and around that day? Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Carolyn. And I know how keen you are to promote Wales, not just here, but internationally as well. I'm afraid I went early when it came to Wales and Japan international relationship. Can I apologise for my warbling? I think I've just killed the reputation of Wales as the land of song. But I do think it's important that Wales and the Welsh Government uses our National Day as a platform to raise our profile internationally. But one of the things that I've done recently is to make sure I've written to the Foreign Secretary to make sure that they take their responsibility seriously in promoting Wales as well. So in many countries we have a Welsh representation co-located with the UK government. But there are many, many places where clearly we haven't got the resources for that to happen across the world. And the UK government have a responsibility to represent us. So I've written to him asking him if he could make sure that every embassy takes that opportunity to promote Wales on St David's Day and at other times of the year.
Cwestiwn 5 wedi dynnu nôl.
Question 5 was withdrawn. Question 6, Natasha Ashgar.
What action is the Welsh Government taking to improve educational outcomes in South East Wales?
Through sustained capital investment in our education facilities, a new curriculum for Wales and a continuous focus on the quality of teaching, we're working in partnership with local authorities to improve educational outcomes in South East Wales.
Thank you for your response, President. Last week in our Children, Young People and Education Committee, the Government's Mental Health Minister revealed that the number of children waiting for an autism or ADHD assessment in Wales would triple over the next 2 years. Between 41,000 and 61,000 people could be waiting for an assessment by March 2027. In comparison, there were 20,770 children waiting for an assessment in September last year. I'm sure that you'll agree, First Minister, receiving a diagnosis is key in unlocking extra support for pupils, which in turn improves educational outcomes for our youngsters. First Minister, it's clear there's a real crisis with an ALN waiting times, which currently is leaving a lot of students in limbo. So what support would the Welsh Government be providing to Welsh schools to help them cope in light of the warning that the number waiting for a diagnosis is expected to triple in the up-and-coming years? Thank you.
Thanks very much. We're very aware that the waiting time for children's neurological assessments are too long, and that's why in November we announced an additional £3 million to speed up those assessments. We know more needs to be done, and we know that the demand is going through the roof. So we have to think carefully and creatively about how we make these assessments in a different way. And there was a very successful event organised by the NHS Executive, an accelerated design event at the end of last year, where we got all the professionals in to try and reimagine what that pathway could look like. And I do think it is important in these circumstances to be creative. We're very aware that youngsters need support, that their families need support, and that's why we've put in that additional funding.
Dallas Jewell.
Thank you, Llywydd. One of the most important determinants of educational attainment is reading books, but so many challenges face the publishing industry in Wales at present in the South East. Publishers such as Riley and Caerphilly do such important work in publishing children's books, and we know that reading books helps children with their literacy, which is a topic of concern here, but it also fires imagination. It helps in terms of empathy, interpersonal skills, ability to understand other people and children. And the situation has reached a point of crisis for the book publishing industry. A number of companies are concerned about their future. And we hear anecdotally about brand new schools that have just opened but don't have the budget to spend on books or libraries. So what is the government doing to improve this very grave situation before we lose a generation of children who enjoy reading?
Well, diolch yn fawr iawn.
Well, thank you very much. It is important that children read and read for pleasure. And that is difficult these days because so many children are constantly watching their screens. So ensuring that they do have interesting and attractive books is very important, and that's why we do still ensure that there is funding available for publishers in Wales, and that is particularly true in Welsh language publishing, because clearly it is difficult to ensure that you recoup funding if you do it commercially through the medium of Welsh, and that's why I think it is important that we continue, and I'm very aware that the publishers had seen a cut once again because of those difficult decisions that have had to be taken in recent years, but we do still support them, but we are highly aware that they are in a vulnerable position.
Saith Mabon ap Gwynfor.
What assessment has the government made of the safety of hillsides in Wales following recent landslides?
Cymru.
The Welsh Government and our trunk road agents undertake regular inspection and monitoring of geotechnical infrastructure, including hillsides adjacent to the strategic road network across Wales, in accordance with UK standards.
Thank you very much. You will be aware of recent reports in the press, and trunk roads have been working on the roads at Dinas Mawddwy and Corris. Both roads there were closed, and they are key routes for travel from north to south. Now, thank goodness, both roads weren't closed at the same time, but it did cause huge damage to businesses that needed to carry goods on those routes for people who wanted to travel to see GPs and attend health appointments. Now, this is becoming more prominent as more waterfalls on our hillsides, so we need an assessment of which roads are likely to experience landslides and what land is most likely to be vulnerable to such damage. So I want to understand exactly what assessment you as a government have made in order to prepare for landslides such as these.
Well, thank you very much. And we do take the risks of landslides, particularly on our transport network in Wales, very seriously. And on the network, we review around 200 kilometres of routes every year. We monitor over 75 routes proactively. So that monitoring is done. I think the seriousness of the recent storms has had an impact on communities and businesses in Wales, and the climate is changing, and we are aware of the situation in Dinas Mawddwy and surrounding Corris, and road safety was the most important issue there. The work was done over the Christmas period, so I want to thank the people who came out during the Christmas period to ensure that those roads reopened as soon as possible.
To Fox.
I thank Mabon for bringing this question forward. Many of my constituents are concerned about the impact of landslides, as many of yours will be, and the effect on their communities. As you'll know, First Minister, the landslip on the A40 is just one example, causing months and months of traffic congestion, leading to huge disruption and frustration, as well as damaging our economy. And other recent examples include the Wye Valley, for instance. We had years of disruption with 2 or 3 landslips on the Wye Valley, and the impact that had on our tourism industry as well. So clearly we need to be more proactive in identifying possible areas of risk, and I hear what you've said that you're doing already, and find a way of assessing the dangers of the hillsides and the valleys. With this in mind, Cabinet Secretary, what action is the Welsh Government undertaking to ensure there is a joined-up approach between public services and agencies when it comes to assessing and proactively identifying potential dangers of hillsides, and a more joined-up, speedy resolution where these happen? Because often the various agencies don't seem to be working fast enough together, and we have these protracted, huge periods of time when nothing seems to be getting done. Thank you.
So much as I said to Mabon, we do, in fact, inspect 200 kilometres regularly, 75 very proactively. We have 2 strategic road network agents in North and Mid Wales and one in South Wales, and there are around 500 employees in both of those areas, and they work with local authorities. So what is important, I think, is to make sure that that agreement with agents and trunk road maintenance, that they know what needs to be done regularly. But I think if you look at what happened in Corris and the speed at which that was turned around, I think that was an exemplar, particularly over the Christmas holiday. And again, I'd like to thank those people who go out in those really difficult conditions. You know, as I say, climate change is impacting on our communities, on our way of life, and on our road infrastructure. And somebody has to be there to ensure that we can mitigate as much as possible when those dangers occur.
Question 8, Jane Dodds.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Llywydd, and good afternoon, First Minister. How is the Welsh Government supporting people who are living in poverty?
We have invested almost £5 billion between 22 and 25 in plans to support people in all parts of Wales who are living in poverty. These are plans that target support for people who need it most, helping people to access what they have the right to access and to help keep money in people's pockets.
Thank you very much for that response.
Our representative from Wales to the UK Labour Government. And we know that the UK Labour Government has actually made people here in Wales much poorer. The winter fuel allowance, now means tested, has left over 500,000 Welsh pensioners without that critical lifeline. The two-child benefit cap, which you and your cabinet branded as the greatest driver of child poverty, has been cruelly maintained, leaving 65,000 children here in poverty in Wales. And national insurance hikes, burdening charities like Tenefus Cancer UK, Wales, they face an annual £250,000 bill when they are actually helping people who are living in poverty. You assured us you would champion Wales. The fact that the UK government is not looking at hiking taxes for the top 1% of the people who earn that amount of money, and that you're not prepared to move forward on the devolution of the Crown estate, is not an answer. We know that that would deliver the £22 billion hole that you talk about that your UK government has been left in. So please, could you tell us when you met with Keir Starmer to tell him that you wanted those benefits to be restored, and what his response was? Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you. My job is to account for what we do in Wales in terms of addressing poverty, and as I say, we spend a not inconsiderable sum on addressing this issue. We have a child poverty strategy. We've had a single advice fund which has helped 280,000 people claim £137 million, which is not a small amount of money. And I think part of what we need to do as a government is to make sure that people pick up what they're entitled to. And there are tens of thousands of people in our country who are not picking up the money that they're entitled to. We also have a discretionary assistance fund for those people who are in crisis and in difficulty. We make massive contributions in relation to council reductions, and obviously we have free school meals, the schools essential grants. We have a long, long list of what we do in Wales to help address the issue of poverty.
Hussein.
The best way of supporting people living in poverty is to prevent them entering poverty in the first place. The former Labour Prime Minister, Tony Blair, speaking on the Jobs of the Future podcast, said that far too many people were self-diagnosing mental health conditions. He stated that you have got to be careful of translating challenges into a mental health condition and losing your own agency in a way to govern your own life. Life has its ups and downs, and everybody experiences those. And you have got to be careful of encouraging people to think they have got some sort of condition other than simply confronting the challenges of life. Mr. Blair said that this was forcing people into benefits system. First Minister, do you agree with your former leader? And if so, what steps are you taking to increase resilience in the future workforce? Thank you.
Thanks very much. I think it is important that we build resilience, but I think it's also important for us to recognise that some people have really tough lives and they need support. And that's what we try and do as a government, is to put that support in, and we put it right from the word go. From the moment we hear someone's pregnant, we put the support in. We put it in when it comes to the sure start, flying start, and all of those support measures at the beginning of life. We put that support in when they go to school. And, you know, you just look at what we're doing in relation to mental health support is quite extraordinary, frankly. The way we have now support in our schools, we have, and the waiting list, by the way, for mental health support has come down massively, massively. It's really important that people recognise the huge strides that have been made in relation to child mental health support. It's also important to recognise that we have a 111 Press 2 service here in Wales that doesn't exist elsewhere. So we are putting that support in to build resilience. Of course, when it comes to poverty, the key thing is to see what we can do to get people back into work. So we need to strengthen the opportunities for people to get into work, and that's why making sure that there are good jobs available which will satisfy people, and that's why I'm working with the Economy Minister and others to make sure that we can produce those jobs that are more fulfilling for people, because I think that is also a factor to consider.
Nôl a cwestiwn now, Russell George.
George Llywydd, how is the Welsh Government improving health services for the people of Mid Wales?
Welsh Health Boards are responsible for commissioning services from a range of providers. Powys Teaching Health Board has received an additional £7 million this year to support delivery in light of ongoing challenges with demand for services and to reduce waiting times.
First Minister, should it be the case that patients from Wales could be sat in the same hospital being seen by the same consultant as a patient living in England, and being told by that consultant you will have to wait considerably longer because you are a Welsh patient? Should that be the case, even though that consultant would also confirm to the patient that there is capacity to see them much, much earlier? Now, First Minister, you tell us that one of your priority areas, your 4 priority areas, is reducing NHS waiting lists. So given that this is your priority, given that ultimately you are responsible for ensuring that Welsh patients are treated in a timely manner, I would assume you will not tell me that this is somebody else's responsibility. Will you provide Powys Teaching Health Board with the financial support they require to avoid their planned increases in cross-border treatment waiting times, or instruct them that this simply is not acceptable?
Thank you very much. So, as you know, as a government, we've got a real focus on bringing, in particular, those long waiting lists down, and we expect Powys to play its part in that as well. It is not acceptable for a situation like that you pictured, you painted to occur. I'm pleased to see that the board is taking its responsibility seriously in terms of the need of behaving seriously when it comes to balancing the books, but I'm also very pleased to see that they have deferred the decision on this matter, and I'm sure that conversations will continue with the Welsh Government.